a tornado by 2 days, but anyway, I'd like to thank the board of the Historical Society for putting the program on, a couple of people who did a lot of work. Thank you. Janda, Michelle Love did the video, and Barb Trace did a lot of our publicity. So thanks to those folks. Tom from George Williams, and George Williams provide the cookies. Cold drinks, Getty Maxwell's for the coffee. So thank you for coming, and once I'd like to introduce now, everybody knows Deb. Deb Supply.
Yay!
Welcome. 50 years ago I didn't think she needs no introduction. Thank you. Welcome everybody. It's a little tight here, a little warm. We're going to try to get the air conditioning up. Anytime you feel the need to get up, use the restroom, get a drink, please feel free to do so. Okay? Good afternoon. Welcome to Williams Bay Remembers, the Palm Sunday tornado, April 11th, 1965. It's a day to quote Franklin Delano Roosevelt that will live in infamy in the memories of those who were here that day. How many of you here were actually in Williams Bay on this date in 1965? I'm really glad you're here because you're going to be able to tell us some information that we wouldn't normally have. Give your impressions, okay? We're going to be hearing from you, and we're going to be viewing this great slideshow that Michelle Love put together. Two things. I ask that you remember that when groups of people get together to discuss an event, inevitably two things happen. Everybody has their own memories, and everybody thinks their memories are correct. So with this in mind, I'm going to ask you that we all listen when people get up to talk with respect, and we're not going to debate if the tornado hit at 310 or 318, and if it went down Cherry Street or if it skipped from side to side. We're not going to worry about those details because the whole event is monumental in its being. We have not had a tornadic event since April 11th, 1965. Don't be shy. Like 50 years ago, we're all in this together. So if you have something, if you see something that sparks a memory, raise your hand and I'll call on you. Okay? All right, Dave, you want to hit the lights there? All righty, here we go. Or? Here we go. What do you remember? Well, I'm going to read from the National Weather Service, their report, a very brief report on the April 11th tornado. On April 11th, 12th, 1965, 47 tornadoes touched down in the northern Ohio Valley's southern Great Lakes region. The outbreak killed 271 people, making it the fourth largest tornado outbreak in U.S. history. Injured 1,500 people across 6 states. 137 people died in Indiana alone. The extent and severity of the outbreak, which lasted 11 hours, covered an area of 450 miles long by 200 miles wide. It included a total of 17 tornadoes that reached F4 and even one F5, which is the most devastating status on the Fujita scale. In your booklet that you have later when you look it over, it has the newer version of the Fujita scale, which is the scale they use to measure the severity of tornadoes. This makes it one of the most meteorologically intense tornado events ever recorded. On the morning of April 11th, the surface low pressure system quickly intensified in the central United States. The system's warm front moved northward, creating a pocket of warm temperatures. Anybody was here? It was hot and humid, and high dew points in the central United States. At 10:45 a.m., a forecaster at the Severe Local Storms Office in Kansas City issued a statement that mentioned the possibility of tornadoes from Missouri to Illinois. At 1 o'clock p.m., the same forecaster issued a tornado forecast, which is similar to a modern tornado watch, for parts of Illinois and Wisconsin. And this shows where some of the outbreaks began. Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan all were hit. It's a warning! No. We're all hit. This is the early outbreak, and this is where the initial forecast was established. Buzzy, you're here. Where are you, Buzz? I know you're here.
I didn't do it. It wasn't.
Yes, you did. I'm afraid you did. Yes. Could you just briefly give us an overview of what you saw when you were here about the weather conditions at the time?
I was in Arkansas.
Liar.
No.
Were you in Arkansas? Really?
It's just Dad.
Oh, it was your father. I'm so sorry. I misunderstood.
And
Anyway,
he's not here today.
he's not here today. All right. Buzz Sr. observed this, and then I've got input from people who, when they heard about us having this discussion, sent in their impressions. So Pam Osmond Jameson, Osmonds lived on the eastern side of town, said, "My recollection is that nothing happened where we lived. It was very quiet, and Mom says all the birds were on the ground. I also seem to remember that Carnes, another family in town, were at our house, and when we heard about it, Dad, Ed, and Ginny went to town to see what happened, and Mom was left at home with all us kids." Cheryl Ortez Hayner lived just off Cherry Street, the Ortez family did, and she said the green sky was one of my most vivid memories. Liz, your brother sent in that I remember the stillness and greenish color of the sky just before it came through, along with the sound of it coming through. So it was a beautiful day from what I personally can remember, but like most thunderstorms in the afternoon hours, this was right around 3:10, 3:15. Tornadoes occur usually between the hours of 3 in the afternoon and 8 at night, usually. They can occur any hour of the day, any time of the year. But this one decided to visit us a little after 3. This is the path it took. It set down at Yerkes, ripped through, lifted up over Geneva Street, took some of the roofs off the houses here, landed back down on right over here. I don't know that it came down completely. When it hit Cherry Street, though, it was on the ground for good. And it just ripped up everything along Cherry Street. And then if you go north, Daddy Maxwell's, I think, is like right about here. That whole row of low businesses, single-story businesses, they were gone. That's after the tornado construction when you go by there. And then it picked up, and then you can see it drop down, drop down, drop down, and it ended up in north of Komal, taking out several buildings and barns about 3:40 in the afternoon. So it was on the ground for a lot longer than we would like. Tornado first set down at Yerkes Observatory. A corrugated tool shed blew up, and then this is, in relation to Yerkes, Judy, where were Herman's?
On Observatory Place, you know where Don Wyrock lives?
Okay,
That,
all right.
that street.
So the Saff family who was living there looked out and saw the Herman garage roof go sailing by. Mrs. Herman, naturally, when you hear a noise outside, you look out the window, and she described having chunks of iron, is how she described it, go flying by. Michelle Amato Gwynn said it took down a massive amount of trees at Yerkes. And my grandparents' home, which is now the Bailey House Bed and Breakfast. I remember it watching it jump right over the houses and take out a couple 100-foot pine trees in the front yard. Also notice Williams Bay, the village of boats, well, they were found everywhere that day. We had them in the trees, we had them in the lake, we had them in Como. They found some from here. So it was a boating adventure, to say for sure. This is another Yerkes Observatory Place family home. They lost the quarter of their home, it looks like. Just totally gone. We're on Geneva Street now, looking down the road to the observatory. Dave Cox said the road going into the observatory was lined with trees that were for the most part sheared off near their base. I remember there being a row of stumps left. When it came through, it sheared them all off that lined the drive, this photo here. It passed over the west side of Constance Boulevard and didn't do any damage to ours or surrounding houses. So I remember this, seeing this when we got back to town. I'm glad we weren't here when it happened, but we're standing on the west side. This is the drive that goes to Yerkes. We're standing on the west side looking towards Geneva Street. Here's a beautiful on Geneva Street. So Geneva Street runs along this way. But they just shredded the power of that tornado. And our tornado was a weak tornado.
Wow.
They only classified it as an F1.
Oh, no.
An F1. Not really sure where this is. It might be near Parkhurst. But look at how it just shredded everything. All the branches. And you know, you go out after an occurrence like this and you look around and you go, where do we start? It's exceptional. This is interesting. Apparently somebody had this beam in their front yard and it got picked up by the tornado and drilled into the earth. Look at how deep that trench is. It looks like they flipped this off the trench here. The flying object. Richard Kenyon family said that they had a 5-foot around diameter tree and it was a corkscrew. The tornado had twisted it, hadn't uprooted it, but twisted it so it looked like a corkscrew. This is the damage on Parkhurst Place. This looks like a garage that imploded. Notice the missing windows. And again, all the tree damage. Lots and lots and lots of tree damage. I'll switch pages here for the now. Here we go. Now remember, this occurred in under probably 5 minutes. It didn't last very long, but for the amount of damage that occurred, this looks like we're standing on Cherry Street looking towards the southeast. This is down, the windows are broken. Almost telephone pole or branch on top of the telephone lines. Everybody was out trying to make sure everybody was okay, number one priority. Roof gone here, just sucked right off the top and then the trees fell on it. Nancy Johnson Tortoropoulos, it's about that long and I murdered it. I know it touched down one street up from us. Around Parkhurst, the second house from the corner across from Saigon's, used to have a large garage that was demolished. A boy from our class lived there, Lee Garrison. It was right on the field leading into the observatory. Cheryl Stenstrom-Ortez said, I stood in the window and watched the pine trees across the street be pulled up and turned upside down. I ran to the back of the house and looking out the window I could see the funnel with tree limbs and debris going from across the empty lot towards Bjorgie's. I was in a panic because my daughter Cheryl was at Bjorgie's. Now imagine looking out and there's this tornado racing to the spot where your little girl is. It's terrifying to think about. These poor folks lost their front porch. This, I believe, was down on Cherry Street as well. Sherwood. Wow. Sherwood had just built a new addition on the east side. And Kristen Tramnell says, Dad said it was amazing the whole roof didn't come off the rest home. It picked it up. There were residents at the time. Dale Coonahan said, when the tornado hit Sherwood Rest Home, it jumped over the west and center sections of the building and took the roof off the newer east wing. They think the roof ended up in Lake Como. But it didn't disturb papers residents had left on their nightside stands.
Oh, wow.
No roof, didn't disturb papers. Also on Cherry Street, let me just go back a page. We had one trailer home in town at that time, and that was owned by Al Horvath and family. Albert, it's right across the street from Sherwood. Al Horvath's mobile home was picked up and laid on its side. Albert held up his refrigerator to keep it from falling on his mother until help arrived. She was underneath it, bracing it with her feet, and he was on top, holding it up. Donna Barbara Kenyon says, we were playing in Brown's Field and Aunt Joan called us in. The green sky was scary. Horvath's trailer went over and I believe Billy was holding up the fridge with her legs. And she was. And I don't have any time frame of how long they were in that situation before help arrived, but imagine how frightening that must have been. I mean, just scary. Frank Draybeck also lived on Cherry Street. The Draybecks lived a block west of here. And Frank V, there's 7 Franks in generations, so. Frank V said, yes, I remember it quite well. I was finishing up my required weekend drill with the National Guard at the Elkhorn Armory. But before I could get to my car, a big thunderstorm hit, and I had to wait for it to let up. When I got to the intersection of Highway 67 and 50, the county police had already a roadblock set up and said I couldn't go through. Thought maybe I could go to the east and go down Harris